The announcement hit like a freight train. "Clara, your employment is terminated, effective immediately." Miles' voice boomed across the open office floor of Crestwell Consulting in Atlanta, Georgia, and every head turned. I froze mid-step, coffee in hand, my fingers tightening around the mug until it threatened to shatter. A wave of disbelief and humiliation washed over me. My name is Clara Bennett, 32 years old, Senior Operations Manager, and until that moment, I had been the backbone of the company's biggest client projects. 4 years of dedication, late nights and sacrifices had led to this very public execution of my career. I tried to speak to defend myself, but my voice betrayed me with a strangled whisper. My colleagues stared silently, some shocked, some incredulous, and some with the faintest glimmer of judgment. Security appeared at the edges of the office, waiting. Miles' smirk suggested he had rehearsed this, savored it even. As I packed my personal items, a small succulent, my grandmother's vintage clock, and my award for Project of the Year, I realized that the company I had poured my soul into had just discarded me. I walked past the staff, their eyes piercing me like invisible daggers. The elevator ride felt eternal, and for the first time in years, I understood the fragility of professional trust. Back at my apartment, I collapsed onto the sofa, replaying the events over and over. How had it all gone so wrong? Something gnawed at me, a brief, almost imperceptible glance from Nathaniel Cole, the finance director, as I was escorted out. His eyes flickered, not shock, not pity, but a subtle, uncomfortable avoidance like he was hiding something. And Miles, he had never been this aggressive before. Over the years, he had been competitive, yes, but I had assumed our working relationship was professional. Now I saw it differently, a calculated humiliation perfectly staged. Something else nagged at me, the missing reports on client accounts. They had accused me of errors I hadn't made, numbers I had triple-checked. And yet, Miles spoke with absolute certainty as if he knew exactly what he was doing. My pulse quickened. Betrayal wasn't just a feeling, it was now a tangible reality. Someone had orchestrated this. My mind raced through every project, every financial report I'd approved, every late-night email. One name surfaced repeatedly in my memories, though I wasn't ready to confront it yet. Someone had exploited my trust, knowing that my diligence would leave a trail pointing back to me. I clenched my fists. I wouldn't cry, I wouldn't beg, but I would find the truth. The next morning, I didn't call anyone, didn't reply to messages, and didn't even glance at Crestwell's inbox. Instead, I walked away. I left behind the prestige, the salary, and the team I had nurtured. I needed clarity. Retreat, I realized, wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Miles wanted chaos, I would not give it to him. I spent hours mapping everything I had accomplished, every client relationship I had built, every internal process I had optimized. In that space of reflection, a new clarity emerged. Leaving didn't have to mean losing. It could mean resetting the board. I began reaching out quietly to mentors, industry contacts, former colleagues without revealing too much. I was planting seeds, gathering intelligence, and waiting for the perfect moment. Each conversation was deliberate, each connection purposeful. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of control. I wasn't powerless, I was patient. And patience, I reminded myself, was the most underestimated weapon in any corporate battlefield. As I looked out my apartment window over the Atlanta skyline, a single thought solidified in my mind. They had underestimated me. And underestimation, I knew, was always dangerous. For the first week, I didn't contact anyone at Crestwell. Instead, I observed. From a coffee shop across the street, I watched employees arrive, watched Miles stride through the office with that same inflated confidence. I noted his patterns, the hurried meetings, the careless errors he overlooked, the way he praised himself while blaming others for minor mistakes. Nathaniel Cole's movements were even more telling, furtive glances, whispered phone calls, and unexplained late nights. Every detail became a piece of a puzzle I was assembling. I had no proof yet, only suspicion, but the pattern was undeniable. Miles thrived on appearances, but beneath the surface, the foundation he claimed to control was cracking. I felt a cold, calm excitement. I had been underestimated, publicly humiliated, and yet I was learning more about the company in a week than Miles likely had in months. Knowledge, I realized, was the first move in my counterstrike. I received an unexpected email from a former client, one I had mentored through a difficult project last year. It was cautious, almost hesitant, but the subtext was clear. "Clara, we noticed some discrepancies in recent reports. Can we talk?" My pulse quickened. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, not to attack, but to establish credibility and show that the integrity I had always maintained mattered. Over the next few days, I compiled detailed project histories, documented every decision I had made, and quietly reached out to 3 more clients. Their responses were consistent: confusion, concern, and trust in me. They didn't know I had been fired, only that certain operations now seemed unstable. It was the perfect leverage. I wasn't sabotaging anyone. I was simply shining a light on competence, my competence that Miles and Nathaniel had ignored. 2 weeks after my departure, the first signs of trouble appeared inside Crestwell. Projects were delayed, budgets mismanaged, and clients began asking questions. An internal memo leaked about a critical review of ongoing project finances, and murmurs of dissatisfaction reached my inbox through anonymous sources. Miles' overconfidence began to falter publicly. Nathaniel, too, looked increasingly nervous during team calls I was hearing about secondhand. Each error, each misstep, was a ripple I had quietly predicted, a confirmation that my absence exposed the very weaknesses they had ignored. I remained unseen, untouchable, as the company stumbled. And for the first time, I allowed myself a private, satisfied smile. The game had begun, and I held all the pieces. The office buzzed with mundane chatter, but beneath the surface, something was off. I noticed subtle shifts, emails disappearing, approvals rerouted, and budget reports slightly altered. At first, I dismissed it as clerical error until a pattern emerged. Numbers weren't just off, they were deliberately misdirected. My heart sank as I realized I had been unknowingly signing off on transactions that looked legitimate but were masking someone else's scheme. The first real warning flashed across my screen like a neon alarm. I wasn't in control. But the system had been built to make me look guilty. Vanessa's behavior had changed, though I hadn't noticed it at first. Late nights, unusual system logins, sudden requests for urgent approvals, it all seemed like diligence at the time. But now the pieces clicked together. Every urgent email conveniently landed when no one else was around. She smiled when I questioned minor discrepancies, deflecting suspicion with rehearsed charm. My stomach twisted as the realization hit me. I had been manipulated, my trust weaponized. And while I had once overlooked small inconsistencies out of professional courtesy, I now saw the cracks forming, and I refused to be the scapegoat. It started as a casual conversation, a hint dropped over coffee by an analyst who had always admired my work. She didn't know I was onto Vanessa yet, but her words confirmed my growing suspicion. Something was off in accounting, and the IT logs weren't lining up. For the first time, I had confirmation that I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't paranoid, and I wasn't alone. This quiet, unexpected ally became my window into the truth, giving me a foothold to prepare for what was coming, without ever stepping outside the law. The game had changed, and now I could play it strategically. I spent the evening in my small apartment, surrounded by spreadsheets, emails, and project files. Every line I reviewed felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Late transfers, unusual approvals, mismatched timestamps, all pointing to a single orchestrated plan. I realized this wasn't sloppy bookkeeping, it was calculated manipulation. My chest tightened as I understood the stakes. If I didn't act carefully, I could be blamed for months of someone else's deception. But with evidence and methodical analysis, I could turn the tables. The first step was patience. Late that night, I noticed a pattern in system logs that could not be explained away. Someone had been accessing sensitive financial systems outside of work hours, weekends, evenings, even holidays. The timing always coincided with Vanessa's emails requesting approvals for urgent budget changes. My pulse quickened as the pieces lined up. The person behind this had extensive access, and every fraudulent transaction funneled through me as an unwitting participant. It was infuriating, but also empowering. The truth existed, hidden in plain sight, and I was finally starting to uncover it. I didn't confront anyone yet. Not Vanessa, not Director Williams. I knew that acting too soon would alert the perpetrator, potentially destroying the digital trail. Instead, I moved strategically, documenting every irregularity and cross-referencing it against approvals, emails, and system logs. Each night, I built a case that was airtight, logical, and undeniable. My anger transformed into a disciplined plan. I would let the law and the truth speak, ensuring the guilty would face consequences, while I emerged unscathed and vindicated. I returned to the office under the guise of a casual visit, parking across the street where I could watch without being noticed. Vanessa arrived on time, calm and composed, while her aura screamed confidence. I observed her interactions with colleagues, smiles, casual jokes, passing files, but my focus remained on her subtle movements around the accounting systems. Every late-night email, every rushed request, every unexplained approval now made sense. I knew I had the evidence to expose her, but patience was still my greatest weapon. One wrong move could tip her off. As I reviewed a file in the coffee shop that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Lucas, a former colleague I had trusted but never expected to hear from in such a tense situation. "I've noticed some oddities too," he said quietly, leaning close. He had seen discrepancies in project billing, files that seemed out of place, and a few emails that didn't match the chain of approvals. Lucas didn't know the full story, but he trusted me implicitly. I realized an ally inside the office could accelerate the plan and give me a safety net if Vanessa tried to cover her tracks. That evening, I pieced together the first undeniable proof: a falsified client communication, a forged invoice, and an email timestamp that contradicted office attendance logs, all pointing directly to Vanessa. My heart raced, not with fear, but with exhilaration. The injustice that had nearly destroyed my career was about to be overturned, and I had the precision to do it without a single misstep. Strategy, patience, and evidence would be my allies. The next phase was about making sure the truth could no longer be ignored. I decided it was time to act indirectly. Using the evidence I had collected, I drafted a detailed report highlighting every suspicious transaction and discrepancy, without nomming myself or pointing fingers yet. I sent it anonymously to the internal audit team, making sure it couldn't be traced back to me. Within hours, subtle tremors began. Audit flags lit up in their system, questions were raised in meetings, and Vanessa's confident facade showed the slightest crack. I sat back, letting the storm build, knowing the office would start to feel the pressure long before she realized where it was coming from. By midweek, Vanessa was restless. Her usual calm demeanor had faltered. She was making errors she would normally catch, mislabeling reports and fumbling with expense reconciliations. I watched Lucas quietly nodding every slip, confirming my suspicions that the tide was turning. I felt a surge of satisfaction, not because I was seeing her fail, but because the truth was finally working in my favor. Patience and precision were proving more powerful than anger or retaliation. Late one night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "They know someone's watching, be careful." Stomach sank. Vanessa hadn't discovered my role, but someone in her circle suspected there was an insider quietly challenging her. This warning only sharpened my focus. The stakes had risen, but now I knew my next moves needed to be even more strategic. One misstep could tip Vanessa off, undoing months of careful planning. The game had changed, no turning back now. The office atmosphere shifted overnight. Colleagues whispered in hallways, glanced nervously at Vanessa, and some started double-checking their own work. Even Lucas, usually aloof, seemed on edge, questioning minor inconsistencies that previously would have slipped by unnoticed. I observed it all quietly from my corner, my heart racing with a mix of anticipation and relief. The first seeds of doubt had taken root, and now the office itself was turning into an ally of truth. Vanessa called a late-night meeting, demanding explanations for flagged entries. Her tone was sharp, her patience thinning. One of the junior staff accidentally mentioned discrepancies I had subtly highlighted. Vanessa's face flushed red, and she barked orders, making it clear she was losing control. For the first time, her carefully constructed web of authority was cracking. I stayed silent, knowing that revealing anything prematurely could ruin the momentum I had built. The following morning, I received confirmation from an external auditor. Several irregularities in project budgets were now officially under review. The audit was comprehensive, and it didn't require nomming names yet. The evidence spoke for itself. Vanessa's calm facade completely collapsed during a staff check-in. Her once commanding presence now seemed desperate and brittle. Watching the pieces fall into place, I realized that the underdog, me, was finally steering the course without ever stepping into the spotlight. Rumors spread like wildfire. Colleagues who had silently supported Vanessa out of fear began sharing concerns anonymously with upper management and auditors. Every whispered doubt became another crack in her authority. I stayed observant, letting the network of truth build without lifting a finger publicly. The energy in the office was electric, half panic, half anticipation, and it fueled my sense of strategic control. During a routine review, one of Vanessa's loyal assistants accidentally handed me a misfiled report, an internal memo she had forged herself to cover gaps in her scheme. I realized the assistant wasn't malicious, just overworked and overwhelmed. Carefully, I used this as leverage, protecting the assistant from blame while gathering undeniable proof against Vanessa. The balance of power was shifting, and she didn't even see it coming. Vanessa was forced to answer questions in a department-wide meeting. Her confident answers faltered under scrutiny, and I noticed several employees exchange knowing glances. Lucas, who had previously avoided confrontation, quietly requested clarifications that exposed inconsistencies. The room's atmosphere shifted from tension to quiet suspicion. The first public crack in her armor had appeared, and the office was finally starting to wake up. I discovered a folder in the company server that had been carelessly named Temp Docs. Inside were copies of Vanessa's emails, spreadsheets, and manipulated reports. Each file was a time-stamped breadcrumb of her deceit, a digital map of her fraud. I didn't touch anything. I simply documented every detail meticulously. Every shred of evidence was now lined up like dominoes waiting for the right push. The board called an emergency meeting after auditors flagged discrepancies they couldn't ignore. Vanessa tried to assert control, but my compiled notes and the misfiled reports revealed her patterns without me needing to speak. I watched as senior executives questioned her, piece by piece unraveling her carefully constructed narrative. Her confident posture crumbled, replaced by panicked stammering. This time, there was no room for escape. Just as it seemed the board would handle the fallout quietly, the head of legal revealed an email chain I hadn't seen. It implicated Vanessa not only in financial manipulations, but in attempts to frame others. Gasps filled the room. Vanessa froze. I realized the timing of this revelation was perfect. The final domino had started tipping, and it was beyond her control. The office had finally turned fully in my favor. The board convened a final vote on disciplinary action. Vanessa tried to defend herself, but the evidence was overwhelming. Every attempt to spin her story backfired. Her promotions were frozen, her access revoked, and the company announced her immediate termination. She left the building in silence, no dramatic exit, only the echo of her own arrogance. I watched from the sidelines, feeling the full weight of justice without having lifted a finger illegally. The company reached out to apologize formally, acknowledging the mishandling of my termination and praising my integrity. My reputation was restored, stronger than ever. Former colleagues approached me with admiration and relief. I realized that maintaining professionalism and letting the truth speak for itself had been far more powerful than confrontation or revenge. My patience and careful strategy had turned the tide completely in my favor. 2 months after I walked away, the company understood what they had lost. But I didn't return. I had grown beyond the office politics and toxic leadership. Justice had been served, reputations restored, and the guilty held accountable. I had proven that integrity, patience, and smart strategy could triumph over deceit. Walking away had been the first step, and watching the natural consequences unfold was the ultimate victory.